Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Chris.
Hi,
We're going to go into lots and lots of talking and sharing and some teaching, but I'm going to lead us in an attunement to start. We lead with our role modeling, and there's never been a time that I felt like, oh, darn, I shouldn't have dropped into my heart and my belly more. So you can please follow along with me if you feel compelled to just turn your gaze inward, your attention inward for a moment. Feel a breath from that space. Nothing to do, nothing to achieve, no points for doing it wrong or right. Simply becoming aware of the in breath and the out breath. As you're noticing the sensations of your body being moved by your breath, the invitation is to draw your focus towards the sensation of your in breath. And imagine having an experience of receiving instead of taking your in breath. See if you can frame your witnessing as a receptivity, as a experience of drawing breath in. And let the exhale just fall away from your attention. Imagine that in breath moving down, taking a downward shape, and experiencing it as a pull into all of your cells in every corner of your body, pulling breath into that depth of self. Now imagine drawing your breath deep into your belly to the place where you feel an erotic pulse of life. Wherever you notice that aliveness in the lower part of your belly, draw your breath all the way down to the depth of that space like a simmering cauldron. Allowing the breath to circle and pool in this place in the bottom of your belly. And then imagine your witnessing gaze as this fire at the root of your being. So you can experience yourself in your mind's eye like a bubbling cauldron sitting on the fire upon the earth. You can feel the cold earth underneath the fire, the warm embers and the flames of your awareness. And then the sensual experience of holding yourself. And connecting that experience to your awareness. And so as we come back into the space, as we come back into a time where we're going to be looking into eyes and learning and interacting with our minds and our hearts, see if you can keep that groundedness, that pool of your intelligence within. See if you can hold your fire internally as well as experience the outer world. And so before you come into the outer world, just use your palms on your thighs, offering a tenderness to your felt sensations. You can give your thighs a little squeeze with your open palms and do the same for your arms. Just communicating safety and containment to your body. And then as you're ready to leave this inner space and hold it within simultaneously as you come out, just place your palms down on your thighs. ground your pelvis a little bit lower and the crown of your head a little bit higher so that you've got some space within. And you can gradually come back into the outer world simply by opening your gaze, inviting the light and the illumination to be a part of your experience again, and then moving through that portal back into our space. So welcome those who are listening now and in the future. It is Moon Day for me in this moment, and we're in a time of this waxing full moon, and Chris and I were just jumping on before we started our little Mistress class on all kinds of juicy things that we're going to share with you and reminiscing on the somatic fire of the body. So if you're new to me, if you're finding this through Chris and his group, my name is Sarah Shepherd. I am a medicine woman. I am a teacher of mystical anatomy. I was a massage therapist for many years and taught massage therapists and worked in the sort of business and coaching realm for many years now. And yeah, I would say I was like a shadow mystic, like kind of like embarrassed about my mysticism for a long time. And now I'm just like, everybody's got this gifting and these powers, and I want y'all to know how special you are. And so yeah, Chris has been a big part of my life and my experience of really landing and mapping these teachings into my body and the way that I share them. We've worked together a couple of times. This will be our third container that we're offering people. And yeah, I'm just so excited to give some really beautiful embodiment tools about the nervous system and about mysticism and about love and the nature of life, and to be able to share it with you. So for anybody that's like new to Chris, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for that lovely attunement. Still sitting with that. Yeah, hi everyone. If we haven't connected before, I'm Chris. My background originally seems like another lifetime ago, but I was trained to be a clergy person and grew up very traditionally religious. And it was within that religious context that I encountered interest in mystical and spiritual dynamics. And eventually those parted ways from the religious structure. But I think some of the essential dynamics remain. And so I've been working with folks, gosh, it's been more than a decade now, in a container of learning about the nature of their soul printing, their soul essence, whatever you'd like to call it, unique essence, and how that's meant to be a sovereign, embodied expression in this world of our wholeness. The dynamic, generative wholeness. So I think we'll really emphasize the dynamic and generative and layers here. So I'm excited.
So oh my gosh, there's so many things I want to share. There's so many things. So maybe I'll give everybody just like a little bit of like context of the container of what we're gonna do today, and then you can really attune to that appropriately. This is gonna be one of 4 mini segments that we're releasing that are promotion for this program that we're leading throughout the summer called Liberated Love. And it's involution of it's the 3rd container, as I mentioned, that we've done. But my invitation is if you can take this as an opportunity to build your own container and really like see if you can either pause now and go kind of make sure that you can be present for 45 minutes to have an experience of learning, to have an experience of contemplating life in a different way, to consider that your relationship might be a portal for your experience of coming home to yourself and really deeply organizing your energy to be more vital in a way that you maybe didn't know that you were shrinking. You maybe didn't know that you were struggling, and that there's this potential to reorganize our energies that Chris and I are really passionate about sharing with people. And so if you're able to, stay present for this period of time, not be distracted by many other things, Instagram and the world outside, and just like pull your attention into this moment for a little while, you'll get more out of it. We'll share a little bit of teaching about yang and yin and the primary forces of the earth, and some slides that are related to these primal forces that we know as yang and yin. But really, when you start to understand where you're occupying them, can lead to these like deep experiences of peace and understanding and spaciousness, and just this like level of beauty that it is really what life is about, right? This is like really deep experience of getting it. You can really get it if you start to kind of just pay attention. So bringing your presence into this, and we'll offer some processes towards the end so that you can get a felt sense of this, because it doesn't matter if you get it in your head. It actually doesn't matter. I think a lot of people already get it in their head. They kind of know this stuff. We're not going to teach them anything that they don't already know. But what we care about is like, can you feel it? Can you make a somatic imprint of it? Can you start to localize and get clear and like where your body is telling you truths, and where your body is telling you to like, look here, there's like something really juicy to look here. And it's my partner that's showing it to me. And it's like, oh, it's like, it'd be such a gift, right? To start to understand those in a different way. So we'll teach kind of some of those elements today. You'll be able to have an experience of that process. Then we'll lead you into some of the, what to expect for the second, the third, and the fourth elements of this teaching. And yeah, share a little bit about the website so that you can get a sense of like where to find the material that we're inviting people to apply to this container, that it's a couples container. You don't need to be in a couple. You can absolutely glean and gain much, much, much richness out of it when you're not in a couple, because a lot of the time I'm an example of this. I'm not coupled. And so I'm like harvesting from all of the times where I had that dynamic, and I'm integrating it in a new way. And I'm also learning how to love in a new way as a result of that. So it is empowering to be in a couple, and it doesn't require you to be in a couple. And so we're inviting couples or individuals that are like really wanting to understand how to be alchemists in the realms of love is, yeah, the invitation. So there's an application, little kind of 12 question application, just to kind of get a sense of, what people are looking for and where they're at, because we're inviting a small group to step into this container with us. There's a lot of presence that comes from Chris and I, and there's a lot of presence that comes from each of the people that say yes to the container. So we really have decided that we are going to curate the best match of people to be a part of this. So please do the application. If there's lots and lots of interest, we can definitely run a second cohort. We can talk more about that towards the end. Yeah. Maybe I'll just kind of like talk a little bit about like how we came to this course of this program together, because it was like 2023 where we did it like a gene keys and leadership through the lens of the Pearl sequence, and it was called Liberated Leadership. And Chris and I have like all of these like leadership keys, both being like Leos, and born very, very, very similar times in the same year in like a similar part of the earth. So I was like, yeah, let's just bring all our leadership keys together and like start to teach from that space. And as the field often does, it just offered such an like just the group of people that came together for liberated leadership was this incredible field of leaders from all over the world that we got to work with in that time back in 2023 through the Pearl sequence, through our kind of gene keys experience. And that was, yeah, it was a gorgeous 3-month container. And then the codependency piece, I was like, Chris, we need to talk about codependency and alchemy. And Chris has been my teacher for like so many years now on alchemy and sovereignty, right? Like this conversation about, I feel like we can't talk about cracking the codes. If you weren't as a part of our program called Cracking the Codes of Codependence, it was, specifically about these ways that we get to have a relationship with fear and the need for safety and the need for love, and how that can transform these like ancient patterns. But it came from this like experience of like, what is sovereignty? Like, what does it mean to be fully contained within ourselves and to have an experience of, essentially being okay under any circumstances. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be nailing it all the time, but there is like this experience of the I amness in the seat of the self. There's a way of living from that is really powerful, and it's a big part of your teaching. And so I'm going to get you to teach a little bit about codependency and sovereignty and give people kind of a, like just like a high level of what that course, that Cracking the Codes course, was really an opportunity for people to kind of start to understand themselves in a new way.
Oh, thank you. Do you have that slide for that one? Was this a good moment for that?
I mean, I feel like it's a bit early, but okay.
Or do you, well, it's okay. We don't have to do, but,
Well, could you speak about like codependency and
sure,
sovereignty maybe first,
sure.
and then I can pull up the slide.
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds good. Um, and again, in that context, we were really talking for individuals. It was following from the leadership course. So it still had a bit of a leadership flavor, but it inevitably started to touch into they would start bringing up stuff in their relationships, um, inevitably. So I think, has naturally been a good segue or flow, a kind of logical evolution that we're now applying much the same teaching to the realm of intimacy and love with oneself, potentially with a partner, with life. So, codependency and its relationship to alchemy, or another word for alchemy could be Tantra, is that the thing that seems like it's the poison, the classic image in a lot of indigenous and shamanic wisdom is like that the antidote comes from the venom kind of thing. If you know how to do it right. If not, it's just more venom, right? It's just more poison. But the thing that seems like it's the problem may actually be something that's an unmet need that's trying to voice itself. And we're not necessarily looking to just play out uh, a flawed pattern, of course, but to try to hear the thing under the thing instead of just get into a problem solution kind of mindset or a managerial, I've got this problem, I've got this issue, I need to get over it, um, versus what's the underlying ache? What's the underlying longing? What's the underlying need that's there that might be coming out in a kind of shadow or not so helpful form? But instead of just focusing on the form and how do we get rid of this form or how do we suppress it or how do we just make it go away or cope or manage, how do we hear the need that's in there and find a different formula for its proper expression and then it becomes a life-giving thing. So in that context, what's usually referred to as codependency could sometimes be seen as a shadow variation of a desire for a different form of deepening intimacy that's probably coming out in a sideways manner. And then we can talk about, oh, people have this codependency thing and and then we problematize them and then they've got a issue and then they get a label or a whatever versus what might actually be the longing of life that's coming out in a kind of shadow or sideways way. And how could that be more consciously embodied? And for me, that moves from a space of, and we talked a lot in that course of codependency moving into a healthy autonomy or independency, and then a deepening call into interdependency, sovereign interdependency. And then that I think becomes the natural doorway into this course. Did I get that? Was that what you were looking for?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing that I feel like happens so often from really beautiful intentions is that somebody in their pain or their trigger or their wound, it can be uncomfortable to be with that. It can be kind of this space in any dynamic, you know, parenting dynamic and a friendship dynamic and a romantic dynamic where it's like, oh, this person I care for deeply is hurting. How can I make it go away real quick? How can I appease that in some way so that I don't need to feel what I'm feeling and they don't need to feel what they're feeling? And what Chris and I are proposing in this is like that is such a missed opportunity to lean in to a couple really sacred dynamics that humans have. And one of them is that everything can be transformed in the face of love. You know, it really isn't that it transforms and goes away. It's that it becomes this opening to like truth and depth and this like really beautiful, deeply seeing what's there. But it kind of comes in its first expression as like this weird behavior, some sort of strange behavior that's triggering and it's annoying. And it's kind of like, let me fix that for you, can be, this really, and I don't want to generalize masculine for this, but like that's commonly the thing that women complain about, is like, I just want to be beheld and I have these big feelings and I want to have this experience of sharing them with you. And in the dynamic with really fixative men, it can be, well, it's just this, honey. You just got to stop doing that thing that you're doing that's causing the pain. If it hurts when you poke here, just stop poking here, honey. And it is well intended. I understand that it's well intended, but one of the things that I've learned with my son in raising a man is this really beautiful experience that I was like so transformative. Some of my inner child work and some of my younger kind of parts as they started to come forward, is that we we learn when love is present, when safety is present, and when love is present, we're able to take the material that's there and we can turn it into gold. We can glean what it is. And that's really the alchemy process, is like taking that sort of charge and understanding it with a new perception where it's fully claimed in self. And that's that experience of like that sovereignty experience where all of me is welcome. All of me is welcome in myself, in my circles, with my partnerships and my friendships. And anytime it's not, what a great opportunity that is for me to kind of like clean myself up in a way, untether myself in some way, kind of clean up those energies. And so that's what we find, is that, when teaching people how to go into this experience of alchemy, there's a deeper understanding of the need for safety and the need for approval. And that's that beautiful interdependence that we have, is like a codependent dynamic, is like, I'm only safe if you're safe, or I'm only happy if you're happy. But if I completely take responsibility for myself, I do need safety. I am the one that's responsible for my safety. And is it here, right? Sometimes in our neuroception, or in many of our cases, our lack of neuroception, we can't feel where safety is. We can't feel the experience of safety, even when it's a beautiful man right in front of us, right? I work a lot with women, and this shows up where it's like, I want safety from him. It's like, well, he's not attacking you right now. Like, he's, that perception is like a little bit kind of unclear at times. So yeah, we'll get into that. So cracking the codes, we broke this down, and I'll share the slide now. I'll go into what it is, this place of, moving between the conscious elements. We'll go into the primal forces in a second, but these kind of, oh wait, am I sharing that? Can you see that, Chris?
No.
I'm sharing it for me.
You've got the healthy independence
Healthy.
going. Or now the interdependency might be calling, but
Right.
I can say that there it goes. I can start to see that. The one of the pieces here about alchemy, the idea of turning the lead into gold, or the charge that Sarah was just speaking about. In that class, we were focused, maybe it's the charge of someone's anger, or maybe it's the charge of their grief, or some resentment, or whatever it might be. And in any case, when it transforms, even though it might be a little different, if it's a grief or a sadness type energy versus an anger, it'll show up slightly differently in terms of its expression. It will have in common the feeling of coming back into more aliveness. And that aliveness, that juice, that zing, where it's gone from dysregulated charge to contained, healthy, clear, powerful life force, that is Eros. That's the zhuzh, that's the zing in life. And in this way, we're looking to have a lot more just zing and joy, and the sense of the sweetness and the effervescence and the passion and the creative juice of life, which is really powerful for everyone. It also automatically leads quite naturally in love dynamics, hence the focus of the course.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a practitioner for 20 years and I am no longer a practitioner. I don't identify as a practitioner. I've stopped teaching in this way of like, we need to heal these traumas and the story of our limitation. And because I've come to this understanding and I deeply feel this to be true for me is that uh, we don't we don't need to heal anything. It's all here. It's just where is it blocked? And how am I in a relationship with the block more than its expression? Because if I'm overflowing with vitality, I cease to be a space where there is non-love, or I cease to be a space where there's non-suffering, or I cease to be this or suffering. I cease to be this space where there's disease and stagnation, because like you were saying, that vital force energy just courses through us. And so, however you're finding this course, however you come to this path where you're like seeking to find a reorganization in some way, that's why we interact with these teachings. It's because there's somewhere your vital force energy is blocked and you're interested in unblocking it. So, that's a very yang kind of awareness. Like let's go into the primal forces a little bit. Yang being this like initiation awareness. There's an inquiry. I'm going along, something's bugging me, and it's here and it's made present, and my consciousness can see it and I can witness it and I can bring my attention to it. So, that element, we're going to speak about the nature of safety and containment and the consciousness of yang as the priority that we lead with, because we can't get to yin and abundance and these beautiful experiences of the tenderness of life, the bounteous of life, without first addressing the primal force of yang. So yeah, I'd love for you to lead a little bit about like the initiation piece is like a great space to start.
Young is a word that could be translated as directive. So it's a directive way of playing with life force. Yin therefore becomes receptive. And it's a really important distinction that receptive is not passive. Sometimes I'll see yang and yin translated as active and passive, and that's, I think, a terrible, terrible mistranslation. Directive and receptive are both forms of activity. And so a directive energy in this case is a really interesting one. And what it initiates is not directive like trying to drive an agenda in any kind of domineering type way. It's actually an initiation to a directive capacity to contain and to space hold and to be really present and have one's presence really fill up a space in a way that invites safety and then in this case would invite intimacy and deeper relationship. So it's a very interesting one in that it is directive, but it sort of directs and then goes all around. Is the way to think of it. And that all around or that bubble feeling for oneself, or potentially if one is space holding for another, is a bubble of protection. So it does have a directive, clarifying quality to it. It has clear intentionality, it has clear direction, but it's also on the edges of it soft. It's actually not meant to be a gate. It's not meant to be a fence. It's not supposed to be sharp on the edges. And so one of the things in the course will be the ability to feel for those who are particularly drawn this way, to feel what it is to be clear in their power, clear in their presence, and then strong enough the trust in their own capacity to just soften the edges a little bit. And that how, when it has the combination of being both clear, strong, a clear bubble, but also a bubble of love and care and safety, then it allows others to start relaxing inside of that. And so that's definitely a distinct initiation. It's not just all like, oh, is it okay if I so it's not so soft that there's no clarity, and it's not also domineering. It's clear, it's strong, it's very present, but it's quite open and contained at the same time. And that's just a real practice. So everybody can kind of play along and see if you can feel that. Anybody's capable of this mode of being in life. And whether it's holding a container for yourself to then go into your own pieces, which is the radical responsibility piece, or eventually perhaps in the course for those who are, coupled or seeking a couple partner dynamic, for one to hold and one to be able to surrender inside of the space of the other becomes, as you said, the foundational and the integral first step.
Yeah, and this is a time where I mean, Chris and I are kind of responding to what we hear a lot from people, which is sort of this confusion around masculine feminine dynamics. How do I hold a strong container? How do I lead from this place? How do I lead my woman? How do I, you know, be an expression of masculine when this word toxic masculinity is like thrown around constantly, or like the elements of the patriarchy. And it's like, what does it mean to actually be safe? And I think it really just is that simple, as like holding that gentle presence, and to be that expression of presence more often than I feel people recognize is the thing we're looking for, is that presence and that attention from masculine, not in the doing, not in the fixing, not in the just like presence is plenty. So teaching that and being able to embody it is part of this, yeah, beautiful practice. And like you said, you can have a feminine expression or a masculine expression and then move to occupying the consciousness of presence, alpha, yang, these experiential energies that are connected to initiation.
And
So,
the awareness there that has this clarity and pervading quality about it. It also is what allows for, as you mentioned earlier, those who find a deep desire in their being to be beheld, to be witnessed, to be really actually seen, not to see with the pre-filters on of, oh, they're doing this thing again, or oh God, this whatever, this dance again. We've been doing this for 15 years, whatever. Like instead to say like this other, if one is in a couple situation, or to look upon oneself like real mystery. To know someone is to actually to continue to enter into the mystery of their uniqueness. And that ability to gaze and behold and just be open to the curiosity and the enticing and alluring mystery. That's again where an entryway into the juice. That's just another one right there. And so that gaze has to be a gaze of love and safety. It's one thing to be beheld, but objectified. It's one thing to feel like the gaze and it feels, you know, ugh, feels icky, feels like agenda, feels like it's got, hooks on it. It's like, oh, people know that kind of being looked at. That's no good. But to actually be beheld, to actually be witnessed, requires immense presence combined with softness and then curiosity, with no agenda other than to behold. And so that's a big part of the alchemy of the yang in this process.
yeah, the gropey gaze,
Ugh.
smarmy, the smarmy, yeah,
You can
totally.
always, it's got the icky, it's got the subterranean, it's got the undercurrent. It's just everybody, ugh, you can feel it.
Which is mixed, right? Because it's actually not young, then it's actually not illuminating, because if it's pulling in any way, like I want it, give it to me. I want to look, I want to consume it. That's actually feminine. That's actually going into the yin. And so this is how these energies get confused. And then what happens is this incongruence between people where we feel it. And then when there's incongruence and we're not fully in our polarity, there's battles that show up in our life. There's like these mini battles that are actually like calling us into our polarity, but maybe recognize that it's safe because maybe it wasn't. That's the thing. It's like sometimes it hasn't been. And so, full permission to realize like stepping into these teachings means finding safety where you maybe didn't know safety already was, and then also being able to like track and clearly go, that is not safe. That is not wise for me to go there. That's why I'm not going there. And to be able to stand in that with your full presence, regardless of which role you're going to be choosing to play. So that's this other beautiful essence of masculine, wise action, protection. And we'll teach about this in this course, in Liberated Love, about these elements of the ancient nervous system and the intelligence of the nervous system to give us very valuable data that we need. But then we get to interact with it and we get to practice holding it in a new way. And that element of the practicing holding it is part of that wise action, or that, I like to call it like that wise fathering energy, which is kind and it's benevolent. It's not tyrannical. And it's not trying to make you heal or make you love or make you be any different than what's true for you in this experience. And like that space of something being bigger than you so that you can start to digest what's true for you in that, and coming, and merging those beheld and the safety pieces together. That's been my experience of it. And really not befriending my nervous system when it's nervous or anxious or, vulnerable in some way, is like, oh, this belongs. This part of me that's like having this experience is part of this information that we're wanting to bring into this dynamic. And taking responsibility. I'll maybe skip to the taking responsibility, but then I would love for you to kind of toggle your kind of shares on the other aspect of yang and yang, this self-honesty and initiative and personal ownership. So personal accountability for my own container and what's here, and moving from this space of sovereignty and acknowledging the I-ness in the experience, how much that creates safety in a dynamic of we-ness, and that personal essence of responsibility can be one of the ways that we untangle these energies. Sometimes we have these tangled energies they just want to be pulled apart so that they're not interacting in their immature parts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along with these mini master classes. But yeah, the safety and radical responsibility, Chris, I'd love for you to share from your perspective.
Hmm. I think safety, particularly in the context we're talking here, has a lot to do with this sense of fullness. And therefore, are we approaching the space of love and intimacy from already feeling full and whole in ourselves as much as is possible? And then we're open to the mystery of another, or of life, or others. And again, this intimacy, this class is focused, in love relationships, but the same dynamics apply with slight variation depending on context of a really close friend, a lovely familial relationship, a wonderful collaborator. These are the same fundamental principles, and they'll just be slightly tweaked, obviously, for the context of the relationship. But the one key part of the safety is slowing everything way down. Slowing way, way down so that we can be present to or aware of more and more kind of micro, subtle dynamics. This is where we will start to feel where there's really yeses and where there's nos for ourselves and for another. And so the slowed down quality is really, really important to safety, because in order to digest the life force in this way, it's a slow, rich, cooked, well, slow eaten, healthy meal. And if there's any moments where we need to pause and digest, there's no rush. And safety isn't just the means to an end, it becomes an end unto itself. This slowed down, appreciative, open to mystery, feeling already full and just expressing from fullness is where we start not having an agenda. and we start not trying to push an outcome, but actually just appreciate like the wonder of if it's a couple and they just want to eye gaze for 15 minutes, or they just want to kiss or give each other a massage, like that's complete and full and whole unto itself. And it's not as in all the stuff you see in all the terrible whatever TV and movies and all the terrible magazines and everything. It's like all these tips and tricks to, like, no, it's not 75 tips and tricks. You don't need 75 new things. Like, no, you don't need that. Like, what people actually long for is deep connection and pleasure and intimacy and love. To get to see and be seen, to get to hold and be held. And that means slowing everything way down and getting into this space that is what I call the agendaless agenda of love and connection. That there's no other agenda than just more love and pleasure and connection. And once that's really starting to happen, and it takes time because we've all been conditioned in all kinds of ways problematically. So there'll be moments of connecting into this different oscillation, and then whoops, whoops, that was the old thing. And it's okay. It's gonna happen to everybody. It's totally part of it, and that's also built into the course. Like what happens when there's a oops moment and a noticing of whoop, that was an old model of, whatever it is. And so safety is hugely oriented to slowing, just radically slowing down. And then starting to notice what's real and what's actually bubbling in the space within oneself and if in a partner practice with another. And the radical responsibility is versus codependency. Other people, even in a partnership or a long-term partnership, they don't exist for the pleasure of the other person. That's not their purpose. They don't exist to complete someone or anything like that. So even when we're playing with polarity, and even if we're playing with polarity in couples, there's a fundamental sovereignty to each being. And therefore, it's really incumbent upon each to develop increasing sense of wholeness and fullness in their being so that if it's in a partnered process, it's wholeness meeting wholeness. And then it becomes generative and very playful, as opposed to deficiency meeting another person and then another person exists to fulfill my needs. And that's the way we've all been trained, and we know what that leads to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of this program coming into fruition and me coming to Chris as like, wow, Chris is the best person I know to work with this, but it came from many of the women that I work with in Oracle Body, learning these elements of containment for themselves, learning these elements of personal safety, radical responsibility, and then feeling this like deep like longing for their partner to meet them in a new way now, but not feeling like their partner knew how to meet them in this way. And I love how you highlighted that like 10 steps to getting her panties off, or like whatever it is. And so many of us are conditioned into this process that you spoke to. And I was for years like, it was like with my marriage, it was like, well, we haven't had sex for a week, so we should. And it was just kind of like, you know like kissing leads to oral sex, leads to penetration, and then it's over in like 20 minutes, and it's like, but we can check it off the list. And he got what he needed, and I'm kind of like, well, I guess like I don't have to do that thing now because it's already been done. But I don't feel like we have intimacy. And when I work with men or when I speak to men, I keep learning this part, which we as we women aren't necessarily aware of. And that's that space of like, oh my gosh, men really, really want to deeply know, like, how do I fully meet you and please you and be present in this experience? Because there has been this conditioning for them also, which, is this like Eros comes along and it's like this race to the end. And maybe I can drag it out a little bit, or maybe I can perform twice, and that could be like great sex. But what we're talking about is like something that is completely different than all of that. And sex may be a part of it, and it might not be a part of it, but that there's this like radical intimacy that is available between two people in that journey when there's slowness. And in the slowness, like you have no idea what's going to emerge from that space of that beautiful uncertainty and that experience of like the unknowing and the mystery that you spoke to, being in an experience of the mystery of life, what emerges from that. When you're erotically alive, when your body is like living erotically in arousal, regardless of where it goes. I heard this thing this weekend, which was really kind of like poignant to this teaching right now. And that is that um, a man's sexual cycle ends when he comes, but for a woman, it's the beginning. And so it's kind of like we're like right there alone in that. It's like, wait a second, we're just starting a process when many people have been conditioned around the yang and the process being about the end of something. It's like, no, this is the beginning of it. And so we're hoping to, shall we lead into the yin from that space of like end?
Yeah,
That's the beginning of our process.
correct. And I think it's important to say, um, again, we said the course is open to individuals and couples, and those couples can be gay, straight, bi, pan, can be the yang and the yin to me is beautiful in that these are really universal human energies. And we can both be open to the diversity of orientations and expressions and so on, but also have something that's held in common. Um, so it's a nice roadmap that to me allows for a great deal of diversity and safety while also creating sort of processes that everyone can feel in solidarity with one another. So yang means directive and yin means receptive. You can have a couple that's a straight couple and she's the yang and he's the yin. You can do it that way. Um, so any number of various combinations are welcome is the point there. But yes, for those who are more yin oriented, erotically and sexually, again, everybody's got both. But in terms of polarity and in terms of first with oneself to learn about the two sides of one's own being, and then usually, practically speaking, noticing if a person has a predominance one way or the other. And then in terms of partnership, they're tending to look for someone who has the inverted dynamic. So if somebody's, whatever, to put it in simplistic percentages terms, it doesn't work out like this perfectly, but whatever, they're 70 or 80% yang, then they tend to be attracted to someone who's 70, 80% yin. This is basically how that works out. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's sort of the simplest kind of variation. So as you were talking earlier about first actually allowing the poles to be differentiated, not separated, not cutting them off from each other, but actually teasing them apart, actually in a healthy way, differentiating them, and in a healthy way, actually giving them more like go more into the yang, go all the way in and see what it starts to feel like to for anybody to really cover the spectrum and then just find naturally where your set point tends to be. For some, it might be predominantly on one. For others, it might be predominantly on the other. And for other people, they might genuinely be pretty flexible and switchy and open. And that's totally welcome too in that case. But however exactly the combination goes, as you stated earlier, once there's the safety and once there's actually slowed down energy, then it sends a green light for the yin. It sends a really deep green light to orient in an entirely different way. And a huge part of this course is what happens when we reorient intimacy and arousal to the yin dynamic. Because as you said, everything is so heavily oriented to the yang. And so it's very countercultural to orient to the yin. And for those who are yin, a big part of their process is going to be to actually learn to stay with their own experience. if they've been conditioned to be oriented to the pleasure of another, or caretake, or perform, or feel like they have to be externally oriented. Yin energy actually spirals inwardly. We talked about the yang goes directive and then makes the big circle, like the spiral out. Yin goes inward. So for one who's more yin oriented in terms of their entry into Eros, they'll actually be needing to go deeper into themselves. And so the willingness that I think is there as the first number there in the yin is a willingness to actually learn to understand, trust, and actually orient for those who are actually yin to their yin process because it's very different than what they've been accustomed usually and conditioned to. And it's kind of a leap. There's quite a bit of faith and there's can be some fear and courage and all of that and the willingness at least even to try. And this is where in this course we're going to start with a lot of really slow, safe ways. If it's eye gazing or if it's just hand holding and breathing together, like just really slow experiences, meaningful and gentle ones, to experience what it is for the yin to actually have the green light to go into their own experience and start safe and then build from there.
Well, and like a really great way to understand your energies is when Chris just said eye gazing and holding hands. If that like did something to you where you're like, or like there's like a contraction inward or like a no that goes outward. This is a really great ways to start to look at the way the energy is already moving in you that might be confusing to you and it might be confusing to the other person. Like I hear this often from women where they feel misunderstood or they feel like they're too much, but they're energetically not legible to another person because they're yang yin, yang yin, yang yin, yang yin, yang yin. It's like hard to read what's happening in that moment. So the willingness to become readable as desire, as longing, as fullness, as this experience of sanctuary, that space requires you to get comfortable with occupying that yourself. And that took me some time to come into. And every time for myself, even when I'm leading myself into it, it's like, no, 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 we're just going to go in. We're going to stay with the in feeling. And one of the things we do in kind of communication in other parts of my career is when somebody's sharing, at the end of their share, they say, I am complete. And like it really just allows you to recognize, I don't need to, I can just like fully be in the receiving of their share because I'm not, are they done yet? Is it my turn? Is it the next person's turn? I can just fully surrender to, they will tell me when they're done sharing. And like that simple little practice of being able to fully experience someone's transmission because they'll tell me when it's over. Little elements like that of building yinning into your life, yin inspiration, like coming down and in to your being self is where all of our abundance is. And that experience, I think, of hunger for it is where a lot of couples run into these challenges, where there's a lot of complaint going on, or maybe there's a lot of finger pointing, or there's sort of this agitation, but there isn't a really true, clear desire that's speaking from the depths of one's being of their desire. So they're trying to find it, but I assure you, it's down in your being under many, many layers. And in order for you to access it, it's really beautiful to have somebody hold that yang space so you can go find it. And it does take some patience. It does take some time. It does take some safety. And ultimately, this approval of what's there, right? Because how many times do we go in? Just like, listen to yourself when you hear me say these words. How many times have you gone into your space inward and gone, ew, that doesn't belong. That's not allowed here. I can't share that part of me, right? Such a missed opportunity in our intimacy, but it does show up. So radical approval of all of you is this really beautiful space of bringing love down in and then having the ability to only go in. Like I'm only feeling inwards. I don't need to feel outwards. I don't need to track Chris in this moment. I don't need to track the kids. I don't need to track these other things in my life. He's going to track them. He's going to track my safety. He's going to hold this space. I can go fully into my experience. And then again, we see this theme of, yeah, mystery, patience, gentleness, these elements of truly being in divine feminine trust, this indwelling feminine presence requires there's a spaciousness, there's a gentleness, and then there's this thing that emerges out of that, which is the Tantra, this awe, this like divine experience of source energy that starts to become something that you can experience as an embodied presence in dynamic divinity. So, yeah, anything you'd like to add to that?
That the same basis here is again for intrapersonal intimacy as interpersonal intimacy. So even if persons are partnered, they still actually learn the solo processes. And as we said, if people are single and solo, then they're totally welcome because this is for everybody to learn first to the intimacy of their own being. Um, Particularly if people are not sure of what their actual deep longings and desires are yet. Or if they think they know, but maybe then they end up getting an experience and it surprises them, and then it turns out there's other longings or desires, or what they thought were true longings and desires were socially approved of scripts of what they should and shouldn't be doing. And the only way to find that out is in the in space, in that willingness and in the gentleness and patience and in sensation and the awe that arises. That's where something novel truly emerges. That's when somebody actually gets in touch with what are their deep longings and desires. And therefore, first for themselves, back to the yang side, the radical responsibility and the initiation and the safety, they have to first create enough safety for themselves to then be able to go into their own experience and find out what they're actually really longing for. From that basis, they may then also, if they're in a connection in a relationship or relationships, they might want to experience either being the one that's really beholding and space holding and allowing the other for a time to go deep into their process, or they might want to be the one who's melting and someone else is holding the space, or they might want to, go back and forth and switch depending. But if we don't know that yet first in ourselves, we're not, again, looking for someone else. Remember that it goes codependence to independence, then to interdependency. We're not looking for another person to fulfill us or fix us or make us whole or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that space of the 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 ability to know when you're safe and to actually choose to acknowledge that experience of being safe and the personal responsibility around that in order to feel something. When we did cracking the codes, it was like kind of about like little kind of triggers in life and working with these like triggers in life. And it was all done in this like somatic or some sovereign, container. One of the things I kept finding was like sometimes I'd go into the willingness, the yin side, where there's the soul illumination, the soul lucidity really starts to be felt as an embodied experience of like, oh my gosh, there's deeply me in my wholeness. And then it would be kind of a bigger kind of experience of that, and it would trigger my nervous system. And so then I was like, oh, going back to the safety now. Now I'm just going back to the safety regarding the boundary, regarding the element of my own containment, meeting it. It's okay. Yes, we found a really big part of us inside. Yes, it's really, really unique homecoming of this ginormous experience of self. And then I could like meet myself in it as well. And the beauty of that is that we can actually invite, I can stay in my yin process if I know this dynamic and I know where my safety is and I'm sovereign in that journey. Then I can also invite the person that's playing the yang or the yang expression to like, oh, I'm experiencing in this moment there's like something that's big, and then they can be affirming and they can be calm and they can bring that like holding in a really beautiful way, which we'll teach. But I wonder if we could just like let's just break down the primal forces for a second, and we've been speaking about them. Should I pop up
Hmm.
that slide or do you want to add anything first?
Or yeah, go. Let's do it.
Yeah. So Chris and I both have a bit of a gene keys affinity or background in working with these elements. We're just going to share some of the primal energies from kind of really beautiful ways of languaging these, and yin being this connection to earth and the energies of earth and the energies of sensation and darkness. And in the translation, yin and yang, in the ancient, like original Chinese translation, yin meant the dark side of the hill, and yang meant the light side of the hill or the bright side of the hill. So they're just really simple organizing sort of states. But I'm going to read the yin, and then Chris, I can invite you to read the yang. And we'll just allow the listener to take a moment, ground yourself for just the experience of receiving. And I'm going to invite you to just pendulate in your experience between the two when you listen to both of our voices. So yin is receptive,
Yang is penetrating,
being,
becoming,
involving,
evolving,
cool,
light,
water,
fire,
feminine,
masculine,
emotional,
thought,
yielding,
agentic,
sanctuary.
mission.
And just take a breath. Let all of those settle. So we get to play in these realms. We get to pendulate and play with these human experiences in order to have more mastery with them. So there's this book by a writer is Alexander Lowen. He's a doctor. He wrote a book called The Fear of Life. And this great quote, it is one of the contradictions of life that a flow has to be contained in order to maintain movement. So this is this really beautiful allegory of, in order for us to have a deeply felt feminine experience of flow, we need riverbanks. We benefit from having riverbanks, and that allows there to be flow that is soft and easeful or rapid at times, but that we're the ones that are really consciously choosing to have that experience. Eros. Yeah, let's talk about Eros. Eros is difficult to define. So I just, this is sort of what I'm working with in my teaching. And it's obviously, a big theme of liberated love is working with this vital force energy of Eros, this self-propagating and generating fabric of you as embodied love, this texture of your soul, also known as vital force energy. And I really love this reclamation of Eros in this way, this experience of like, it is my vital life force. It's not something dirty and like, oh no, this erotic energy and it's like it's only sexual, it's like it's your vital force of energy. And anybody, just think of like post amazing orgasm bliss face where you're just like, oh my gosh, it's like erotic energy has been coursing through you for hopefully hours, and you're able to have this experience of being like fully alive and simultaneously like deeply soft and within self. This sort of ingratiation of self is what this experience is for me of, yeah, I've come to a new appreciation for Eros, and I love to go into the teaching around, the divine forces of Eros and these other kind of mystical ways of looking at Eros, which I will include at some point. But yeah, just this is my working title for Eros. What would you say, Chris?
Oh, it's really good. I think, and I'm glad you pointed out. So Eros is much, particularly in its original Greek context, is much larger than what we call now in modern terms and in English erotic with a little e, which is just really another code word for sexual or sexualized. And so a big part of this process, I think, is Eros is a bigger circle, and the sexual ideally is meant to be within the erotic. When the sexual is divorced from the erotic, then you get things like porn and you get a lot of just really loveless sexuality that can be often, you know, harmful in people's lives. Eros is not circumscribed only by the sexual, but obviously the sexual is a prime zone of its expression. You're not going to have Eros without also having extra arousal and libido in your existence, right? But generally, Eros is just really the yumminess and the juiciness and the zing to life. Like, so that the more that we're cultivating a healthy embodiment of our Eros, capital E, erotic expression, the strawberries are sweeter. The sound of the birds is crisper. The face of a beautiful person is more lovely. The the colors are brighter. The sounds are more inviting. And just life becomes full of just way more effervescent sweetness and passion and creativity. And that oscillation of yin and yang as the idea of the primal forces in the Taoist tradition, meaning that the word used was pendulate, you know, like oscillate, swing back and forth. The more we get into that rhythm, the more we're naturally aligning ourselves to the current of life. And that will automatically show up in extra joy, extra passion, extra life force, extra. And as it turns out, that also happens to be really great for anybody who's looking to, deepen an existing relationship, find a new relationship. Turns out that that person turns out to be attractive. Turns out that they start to shine and get interesting. Um, and that's how we start to found relationships in a kind of sovereign, wholeness-based interdependency by being in touch with this incredible current, this ever self-generating, as you said, current of life that brings us the universe and that absolutely courses through. And with enough safety and with enough container to titrate it, as you had that beautiful image of the current and the riverbanks are strong, then increasingly an individual can channel the entire current of life through their body. And that becomes ecstatic. And that also is potentially on the board in this course for anybody who, the level of safety, given that the enormity is that, the intensity is that strong, therefore the safety in the container and the slowed down is just that much more exponentially so.
There are no
Uh,
problems when you're fully turned on. There are like no problems in the world, right? It's like you don't need anything. You got it all in you and you're just like overflowing with it. And like that's available at all times.
And it really is primal. And I think it really helps emphasize that the point you made at the beginning, which is that yes, it can have a healing function as a kind of positive side effect in a good way, in a healthy way. But the focus is to be generative and to be primal and to be expressive this way.
Yeah.
And it will have healing effects done rightly as a nice positive side effect.
Yeah.
But it's not starting with I'm broken, I need to be fixed, and I don't know. It's more art than yeah.
Yeah, more art, more an aesthetic. I like that expression of like this kind of this way of interacting with life and the simplicity of like we are born from sex. Sex is creative force that like drew your parents together and then they had this brilliant idea to bring you into the world whether they knew it or not at that moment, but that's what created your being. So of course that is the material that we'll be working with in our being, and when it's not there, it shows up in these symptoms in our life. It shows up in our physicality. It shows up in our dynamics with our children. And so it is really just like pulling it all back in and then occupying some part of that primal force intentionally so that the erotic energy can reformat all of the times that It wasn't fully beheld or it wasn't fully contained, and our energy got fractured. It went out in some way and got left behind. And what we're teaching in this program is like how to pull it all back in and really how to work with it masterfully. And um, I would also kind of say like there'll be little elements of teaching that kind of help set the landscape, but so much of this program is embodiment and practice and like integrating it into your life in this way that you're really building this. I call it the medicine body because so much of my work is in shamanism. But it's like pulling all of that life force as a way of consciously ushering or shepherding is the other expression that is convenient for my shepherding your life force so that you're
Yes.
magnetizing. If you're wanting to magnetize something, that you're staying in the seat of yourself to pull it to you. You're pulling with your fire. Or if you're wanting to have a more dominant expression, or if you're wanting to take a more leadership expression in that, it's like you're pushing fire. You know how to orient and how to work with that in such a way that it's received a really beautiful clarity, right? Like people love it when there's great leadership and they come into a calmness and they come into an experience of like, okay, this is clear. Thank you. All right, let's move, right? If you're getting a bunch of static, you're probably not in a clarity of your energy in some way with other people, or maybe they're not in a clarity of their energy. So when we each shepherd ourselves, everybody else reorganizes. There's this crazy thing that happens where it's like, oh, I don't need to fix you. I don't need to fix my partner. I don't need to fix anybody. I don't need to make them do liberated love. I can practice this. I can transform my own frequency, my own experience of self, and then watch how my perception of the world shifts and watch how I magnetize new experiences into my life. So yeah, small group. I'm going to talk about the page in just a second, but
Mhm.
before I do, just kind of like elements of, well, let's maybe talk about like where we're going in the other little mini master classes that we're going to do. And I feel like you're the best person to teach that part.
Well, so the next, is it the next part? I think
Yeah.
it's the next part
Yeah.
is we'll then go deeper into this idea of polarity. Here we've been talking about polarity as the in-breath and the out-breath of life. The tide moves in, the tide rolls out. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it because it's everywhere. Um, that's all over in life. It's the primal forces of the day and the nighttime, and the movement of the sun and the movement of the moon and its gravitational field and Earth and moon's relationship. You can just, everywhere you look, you can't but see it or unsee it. So we're starting there, and then as we look to then talk about it more specifically within the context of sexual polarity, we will talk about the yang as fire, yin as water, and teachings of how we locate fire and water and create an alchemical crucible, which is fire underneath water, like think of a classic jar and fire source under your water, and the water starts to steam and bubble. And that's how that happens for a yang person is very different than how that happens for a yin person, or predominantly yin, let's say. And therefore, to reorient sexual and erotic and intimacy first to the yin is a whole different ball game, as we've been hinting at, but we'll go into a lot more detail. And that will eventually lead us to explorations of specific kinds of polarity dynamics that involve intentional play with power. That's kind of the step further down the road. And some people want to go that road and some don't. And that's fine either way. Like some people are really drawn to the polarity unto itself, and that's their way in and go for it. And for others, they also have interesting, as they get in touch with their longings and their desires, they may also have interest in polarity as well as the play of power. And we will talk about safety and consciousness and conscientiousness and how the polarity work creates the proper foundation for that, and then how to add in, should one want to, sometimes, frequently, every so often, how to play specifically with the polarity of power. And I think, am I forgetting one more piece that we would go into?
The arc, well, kind of we
The
touched
emotion, yeah, the emotional, the whole energetic arc
on.
of the particularly oriented from the yin's perspective, how they go through what is in fact an alchemical, a transmutative process of safety, giving the green light as an end unto itself for what is usually called arousal or foreplay, and we'll talk about how that's not the right framework. Um, and then how that's a fullness, and that may lead even further into spaces of deepening intimacy, and then how that's properly integrated and held as an entire kind of U-shaped arc of integrating the movement of eros through one's being. And then how that will then spread out, as we said, from specifically a sexual context to breath, breathing, eating, sleeping, playing with people, dancing in the world, creating, writing, art, leading, etc.
Yeah.
That will all be infused with the same sense of awe, innocent, primal, creative generativity and sovereignty. Did
Oh,
that cover it?
I mean, I just want to underscore it because I feel like this has not been shared enough for the world. Is like we're gonna do an entire mini class that is like a woman's arousal arc and like the like whole experience of what that actually can be, as opposed to like a lot of what we've been taught that it is. And so that's like in the mini masterclass series, like that's one class. That's number three that we're gonna do. The whole thing is devoted to a woman's like the whole yin cycle. I just can't say it enough. I'm excited.
Well, it's a yin cycle, which primarily we'll probably be looking at through female anatomy for sure.
Aha.
But it also has to be said, like it's a yin arousal cycle. So if it's a male body that wishes to be submissive or yin, it's actually still the same fundamental principles
Right.
of safety, trust, slowed down,
Yeah.
start on the outside, always only work in every zone is whole unto itself and is not a means to another end. Like all those points will speak to anyone who, to whatever degree, wants to access their yin,
Yeah.
whatever orientation, gender, you name it.
So
Yeah.
if you have a yang, but you want to get yin to it,
That's also
masterclass.
there too, that you will enjoy that, yes. And if somebody switch, if you know, yeah,
Ah,
absolutely. All
okay, and we've
comers
been throwing the
welcome.
terms around a little bit. We've been like kind of casting like we're gonna go into BDSM, we're gonna go into some kinky places, we're gonna talk about how to work. You're so cute right now.
I
Look
know,
at
and I
you,
guess where I
so
get a little
blushing. It's
embarrassed.
adorable. You're making me blush. It's a really arousing topic to share and to go into. Is this place of like once you get your polarity straight, once you get like who's on first, who's on second, and then we slow it all down, there's some incredible masterful techniques that can be played with in this realm of dominant submission, these like terms of you said switch earlier, which is basically like a person that can go play either dynamic, hopefully with some agility. These are
Yeah.
great things to kind of learn and really beautiful techniques and tools that we're going to bring into the program. So the fourth master class is going to be a little bit cheeky, playful,
Spicier. Yeah,
kinky,
a little bit on the
classy,
extra spicy.
extra classy.
And I'll try not to be blushing the whole time.
Yeah, you can. It's all right. Like,
Yeah.
well, it's super sweet. Um, and yeah, so that I'll just say like tune into those when you're ready to tune into those. And maybe what I'll do now is I'm gonna briefly go through our sales page so that you know kind of where to find some of the material of like what it is that we're going to be covered. You're like so unclear right now. Um, is it your
Well,
blush is
but
like taking over your camera?
oh, I
You're
got
focusing you.
I defocalized. Is that better? Is it fixed now? It goes in and out of focus. It couldn't handle me going into, couldn't decide if I was accessing some yin, I guess. I
A man there
couldn't.
or a tomato? I don't know.
As a way, maybe I was, but the logic of those four, just to say, is that we're going like each one is a deeper level, so we're going in its own titrated formulation to follow the logic of the course. Yeah.
Yeah. And to give you like tools from a space where you know how to wield them, don't give anybody dull knives, give them sharp knives that they know
Yeah.
how to work with. So that takes a little time to kind of get people into that. So we will be covering that as the final month of the 12-week program. But this is the sales page. It's going to go through all of the details of like, is this for you? Are you looking to reignite the spark in your individual or couple experience? Learning how to lead from surrender and wholeness with integrity. It's really like so much of this program is about moving from congruence and integrity so that you're clear, that you're energetically legible, and that can lead to this more beautiful experience of richness. We've broken it down into working with the nervous system, the embodied eros elements, like we just kind of touched on. Chris is going to lead us through a little experience of this in the closing. Conscious polarity as a devotional art. So whether you're practicing from dominant or submissive archetypes or energetic leadership, working with taboos and desires and the experience of the bliss pervaded body being multi-orgasmic incarnations, because that's available. And why wouldn't we interact with it if it's available? Would you like one orgasm or multiple orgasms? Yeah, I think I will supersize that, please. Part 3, devotion, integration, and erotic mastery, is this juiciness of life and this utter radiance experience where we become this sacred embodiment as a way of living, and yeah, moving from the space of integrating the devotion as a living practice, and take some time to repattern these things. So that's why it's 12 weeks. Each session, Chris and I will be offering live classes throughout the program starting July 14th. Each live session is a teaching and then a lot of embodied experiences that will give you a really strong somatic imprint. So you'll know where to locate it in your body. You'll be able to work with these energies and come into your own experience of mastery throughout this 12-week program. And there's going to be, home practices as well, because this is like a living life lab. Like we're turning our bodies into these alchemical spaces that, when we work with them, they have this outcome of healing or illuminating or having this experience of like, vital force energy coursing through us in a new way. So you're going to have homework to do with your children, with your friends, with your pets, with your experiences, with your mirror. There's going to be ways of working with your own somatic experience, as well as journal prompts and integration maps that might have a little bit to do with like, elements of gene keys or energetic teachings that we have from both of our libraries of teachings that we offer. Every month on the fourth class of the month, so we're meeting every Monday or Wednesday, there's an opportunity for you to choose what works better for you, if it's like a Monday daytime or an evening class. Either way, the fourth class is going to be, we're going to break everybody up so that Chris is going to lead one circle and I'm going to lead one circle. He's going to lead the Dom leading support from the perspective of the flame as the one class, and then the other class is going to be the organization of the feminine energies or the surrendered embodied experience of guidance that I'm going to be offering. It's called the cauldron. So we get to kind of move into our how we organize our energy at that point, how we're organizing our energy in our experience, so that the ladies or the yin will be with the yin, and the yang or the yang, and the men will be in their experience. So then we can get kind of clear and come back into the next month that way. So we'll get to have 3 experiences of these broken apart classes, or these kind of polarized classes, and that you get to keep a copy of all of the recordings. All of the sessions will be recorded. There's going to be so much material in this course. I highly recommend that you go back through it. Giving yourself permission to just experience it the first time is like, wow, I'm going to experience a lot of new information. And that way you're not worried about like getting it in every detail during the course. This is us. You can learn more about us from both of our web pages. And this, there's a lot of really beautiful teachers out there, but Chris and I both wanted to bring something that was like super grounded and like to bring people home to what's already there in themselves. You don't need to, this is a remembering. You don't need to achieve it. You don't need to like get something in a different way. It's an experience of restoring your essences. And so it has this beautiful outcome of it being true to you in a restoration and not something that's like beyond where you want to go. And so I think that that's important is like you might be able to learn about BDSM from a book or, in an experience, or you might be able to learn about these Tantra elements of life in a course, but this one's been curated specifically for you to make sense of it for yourself and an individual as well as a coupled experience. Polarity is not devotional or performative. Yeah, let's have an experience of that. So the course per person is $19.97. It's $3,888 per couple, starting July the 14th. We're looking to keep the group, under 10, max 12. We'll do another cohort if there's a lot of interest of it, but we really just want this to be an intimate experience for everybody to be able to more deeply feel safe. There's something that happens in small containers where the group field starts to carry in a new way this like beautiful experience. And so that was something that Chris and I both were aware of like, we don't want this to be a big container. We want this to be a really intimate container where people can bring their whole vulnerable experiences forward, which, sometimes there's some bits in there that are stingy and ouchy, and it's really lovely to be able to have it, held in this way where it's playful, but it's also like deeply, there's a sensitivity to that. And so we're holding that space for everybody of the wounded places are welcome, the shameful places are welcome, the scary things that it's like not been safe to share or because they were too big to be held in the past, like that, all of that can be held in the container when the container is built with as much intentionality as we are bringing in. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share about that. That's the salesy
Yeah.
side of it. And yeah, you can apply and then book a session so we can just have a little quick interview with you. But let's feel it. Let's do some like just experiences of polarity. Chris is going to lead it. And I wanted to close with this so that you can just like, end this experience with that being an embodied experience. And there'll be plenty more learning to come.
Yeah, thank you everyone for watching, listening. Thank you, Sarah. Um, I love that you said there at the end, the ouchy bits are welcome, the supposedly shameful but turn out to be not shameful bits or, parts are welcome, and places where there's pain are welcome. And I'd say also like glorious aspects are welcome. Another part of this class is like to allow our radiant aspects, to allow like our power, our presence. It's this weird thing culturally because we have all this mushy middle, watered down milk toast, lukewarm thing that doesn't allow for the differentiation of these two energies and then their reintegration from their places of power. We end up with this like it's shameful to have pain and tenderness and that, but it's also kind of shameful often to be like clear, present, radiant, powerful beings too. Um, so the shadows that are referred to as the dark and the golden shadows are all welcome in this course to get to enter into our wholeness. Um, so thank you for that. And more fun to come in our next dialogues, including some of the spicy ones. Which, yeah. Okay. So again, yin and yang are these kind of primal poles of life. And as we start to get used to just orienting with them, we find that there's more aliveness, more natural joy and native pep in our step. That's the easiest entry point, which will then eventually lead pretty naturally to love, intimacy, arousal, desire, ecstasy, and so forth. But just to get a very basic and foundational understanding of directive and receptive yang and yin, we're just going to work with our senses because it's already happening anyway, as Sarah's been mentioning multiple times. And we can just put conscious attention to it, which will help develop more capacity to sensitize ourselves to it. So, starting with the visual sensation, just take your eyes and look at something in your field of awareness. Doesn't matter the wall, you're looking out a window, I'm looking at the trees, the camera, whatever. And really feel your gaze looking out at something. Really feel like you're directing your gaze. You can concentrate, you can get more focused, you can make it a little wider. It doesn't really matter, but the main part is that you feel like your attention is propelling, is kind of propulsive from your eyes out. You're looking out. You're the center of the action. You're initiating the action of directing your gaze. And take a breath. And you might help to flip to first close your eyes for those who want to, or a soft, non-focused gaze if eyes closed is a little too intense. And then if you got them closed, when they start to gently open, let your eyes be receiving the sensations and the color and the imagery from life. No longer that you're looking out, but that life is almost sending you a message and your eyes are receiving. So take in whatever life is showing you right now. So again, it's the same stimulus, it's the same visual oriented sensation, but a very different experience if you're gazing, directing your gaze versus if you're receiving sensation from life. Again, take a nice breath and reset. You can do the same with your hearing. So again, we'll start yang. Put your attention to your hearing and really imagine like you're sending your antenna out from your ears and you're really listening out into your environment. Like you may even feel like you're straining your ears a little bit to hear quiet sounds. Like your ears are really perked and your antenna are up and you're scanning for subtle sounds. And then we got a breath to help kind of come back to zero. And this time you're just going to let the sounds come into your ears. As if your ears are these giant, big, open sound dishes or bowls. And the sound is coming from the world around you and just entering or funneling into your ears and into your being. You're not really listening, you're rather hearing what life is saying to you. Again, both beautiful ways of engaging life, just distinct. One's not right and one's not wrong. They're both important, but they're distinct. And it's nice to be able to consciously be able to move from one to the other with agility. The last sensation we'll do is touch. You can, feels all right for your own, get one hand to your arm, or if you prefer like a object, a table or a chair or whatever you're sitting on. But first, feel yourself press gently, but still like press down. Doesn't have to be, doesn't need to cause pain. But Just a firm enough grip that you can actually feel that you're sending intent with your touch. You're holding, you're touching. It's a yang form. Should be containing, shouldn't be gripping or pressing, but just like if you were holding something, holding a glass of water and you're just really holding it, so it's not going to drop out of your hand. Again, relax. A little breath. And then this time, let your hand touch, but your hand be open and receive the sensation. And notice as we go through these, is there one or another that feels more comfortable or familiar? One feels less familiar? Do they both feel comfortable? Do they both feel a little uncomfortable? Did it change from visual to hearing to sensation, or was there a pretty common theme? It'll be different for different people, so check it out for yourself. And these are just nice ways to get us in touch with yin and yang. And throughout your week, in safe ways, work on both so that you're building up capacity in both because they're both good. And that brings us to completion on the process.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the experience of moving from like looking to receiving imagery. I felt like the looking was actually kind of like taxing, where I was like taking it apart. Like there was like a real taking nature to it, as opposed to like the receiving, which was like I just was like able to fall into the backseat of myself, I
Mm,
call it. So yeah, it's neat.
mm,
There are, whereas in hearing it was kind of like, oh, I was like more agentic in the hearing essence than I was in the receiving. So it is really beautiful to play with, and that's the encouragement. And we've got more to come, and we'll have kind of future little mini classes coming your way. But please reach out, ask us any questions. As you can tell by now, we're pretty friendly people. We're happy to answer any questions. So thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, everybody. Look forward to connecting. Feels right for folks.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Talk soon.